early 1972, Steve Sesnick was contacted by Polydor Records. They heard about the recordings that he and Doug Yule made and wanted to release them, but not as a Doug Yule solo album, but as a Velvet Underground fifth studio record. The band had a sizable following in Europe, and Sesnick somehow managed to talk Polydor into buying the tapes. The Shyster manager had one last hustle, and he tries to squeeze a few more bucks out of the band's name. Sesnick contacted ATI, a music booking company, and they were supposed to work together on a future Velvet Underground tour. According to Rob Norris, this 1972 lineup was going to tour Europe to promote the future release of the unnamed album, and he was going to play bass guitar, with Sterling Morrison on lead guitar, Maureen Tucker on drums, and Doug Yule on vocals and guitar. Norris and Tucker would jam together for a few days while Sesnick kept on trying to convince Sterling to join the tour. Morrison, however, didn't want to come out of retirement and tour Europe, so Tucker bowed out as well. Desperate for a drummer, Sesnick contacted ATI, who gave them the phone number for Mark Nauseef, a great drummer, but unfortunately he never heard of the Velvet Underground. Rob Norris switched over to rhythm guitar, and George Kay was going to be the bassist. Doug Yule, who was leaving New England to head out west because a job offer as a carpenter in Denver came up, but he jumped at the chance to tour Europe as the Velvet Underground. According to Doug Yule, I drifted off to New Hampshire and I was working as a carpenter. Then I decided to move to Denver, and I had a job waiting for me there, so I packed up the truck, and in this little van, we were heading out west. But we stopped in New York to visit my parents for a week. I got a call from Sesnick, who said, "There are some people who wanted to do a tour. Do you want to go to England as the Velvet Underground?" "Sure, I'd love to," I said. "I don't want to be a carpenter. I want to be a musician." So all four members practiced together for a few days before flying off to England to begin their grand tour of Europe. Well, the problem was that there was no money for the tour, and the gigs were not as many as they thought they were going to be. Sesnick went out and took the money that was going to fund the tour and band equipment. He just disappeared. According to Doug Yule, we went over there and we got into London with the same people that we had worked with us before, and as soon as we walked in, there was nobody there to meet us. Sesnick didn't turn up, and we didn't have any money or any hotel, so we were stranded in the middle of London. We didn't even have credit cards. Rob Norris had a friend who was a student there who had a cold water flat. And in London, when they say cold water flat, they mean it. This was November. We slept on the floor that first night and froze. Then I found my sister who was going to school there. I went over to her place and camped out there. There was an extra room, so I rented a room for a while. We put together some equipment. Sesnick was supposed to come up with some money for a deposit, and he didn't. So finally the promoter did. We got the equipment and we went out and actually played the dates. Everything worked out okay. There was no complaining from anybody on the road that this was not the real Velvet Underground. When we finished, we all counted ourselves lucky and went home. The tour took place from November 18th to December 9th. Unlike the last tour in 1971, the band only played in one college venue. It was mostly a bunch of small clubs that the promoters managed to book. The first show took place at the Malvern Winter Gardens in Malvern, England on November 18th with 9:30 Fly and Sidewinder as the opening acts. On November 20th, the band played at the Top Rank Club in Doncaster with Iguana and Budgie as the openers. 2 days later, on the 22nd, they performed at the Acton Town Hall in London with McKendry Spring and Noble Savage as the supporting groups. The band traveled to Wales to perform at the Top Rank Cardiff on November 26th with Thank You and Sullivan opening the show, but they would get into some trouble. According to Rob Norris, we had one really rough time in Cardiff. The club was supposed to pay us cash up front, and they didn't, and our road manager said, "Well, they're not going to play." We were in the dressing room, and this real sleazy lowbrow guy with the club went on stage and got these skinhead types all revved up like, "Well, they're here, but our money's not good enough for them." They came after us and tried to bang down the door. It was George Kay who said, "Shit-ass punks aren't going to bother us. We're going to go out that door, we're going to get in that car, and we're getting out of here." and they're not even gonna touch us. So we formed a flying V with the guitar cases, burst the door down, and moved through the crowd, and they didn't even bother us, but I was fearing for my life. On November 23rd, the Velvet Underground opened for the Electric Light Orchestra at the Sundown in London, England. On December 2nd, the band played at the St. Albans City Hall with Fusion Orchestra and Pugman Ho as the opening acts. Melody maker writer Meredith Knoll said of the band's performance, "The evening at Words in St. Albans City Hall last Saturday turned out to be the night of rock and roll. On came the Velvet Underground, every inch a rock and roll band." A lot of their material was old stuff, necessary, as the band pointed out, because the British fans have yet to hear the new material. Their most recent album hasn't been released yet. Old faithfuls like Waiting for My Man and Sweet Jane harken back to the days when Lou Reed was in the band. Half the audience was there to see a group which must be legend now. The other half were there to rave, so everybody was happy. The Velvets had been jamming in the dressing room for over 2 hours before they came on stage. They obviously liked playing. People were listening, people were dancing, and everybody had a good time, and the encore was heroin. They played the top-ranked reading suite in Reading on December 4th with Fat Grapple as the opening act. The Velvet Underground traveled back to Wales and played at the St. David's University. During this show that was taped by an audience member, Doug Yule mentioned that the fifth album has been delayed due to the master tapes that were recorded a year ago having disappeared. He played 4 tracks from the new album, and the band sounds just like the old Velvet Underground due to the blistering, dueling guitar attacks by Rob Norris and Doug Yule, who sounded like they're just having a blast. The band then travels up north to Newcastle on the 8th of December to play at the Mayfair Ballroom with Geordie as the opening act. The last stop on the 9-date tour was a show at the Northamptonshire Cricket Club in Northampton with Mackenzie Spring and Nidrolog as the openers. The band flew back to the United States and parted ways yet again. This time, the Velvet Underground was officially over. Or is it? Where is the 5th record? Will this be the last time that we will hear from the Velvet Underground? The final episode will hold all of the answers. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Cuppy's Music Curios. My name is Cuppy, and I hope to see you soon. Cheerio!